Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my YouTube channel again. My name is Emmanuel Ngono. I'm the economist, right? And we'll go ahead and just deep dive into economies of the world. Remember I said last time, here is where you're gonna get educated about economies of the world. I've started with African countries. I want to see how are they doing, what are some of the challenges they're having and all that. And ladies and gentlemen, today I want to do an interesting country. And if you can remember, this interesting country is a country mentioned in my last video. Please go ahead and check out my last video. The country that we did was actually a country that the GDP was a bit higher than this country, yet that country was unrecognized. It's still unrecognized state, by no unrecognized in a nutshell. This country I'm going to do today is a country that has had autonomy for quite some time. It has a government, it's recognized worldwide, so we wanted to deep dive and find out what's the issue. So ladies and gentlemen, stay here, stay tuned, all right, throughout the video, because I'm going to show you some interesting facts about this country, and you're gonna even love the history of this country. So please stay tuned and consider clicking the subscribe button, all right? And please click the notification bell so that you're able to get all my videos. And please just go back and watch the other video that I did about the other country that is unrecognized, very interesting video, all right? And consider subscribing as I say, right? Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up because it's gonna be a bumpy, no. It's going to be a smooth ride. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, all right, let's now deep dive into this country, Eritrea. That's the country we're going to deep dive today and see what's the economic growth, economic development, all factors affecting the economy. We're going to deep dive into different sectors to see this economy, how is it sustaining itself, and what's the background or what's behind the low GDP. But first, I'm going to give you an interesting history about Eritrea. I'm not going to concentrate on pre-colonial period, but I'll concentrate on the colonial until independence, when they got their own independence. All right, let's start. Let's go. All right, first of all, in 1950s, let's start with 1950s. The Ethiopian federal government under the Emperor Haile Selassie sought to annex Eritrea and Italian Somaliland. So basically, Haile Selassie wanted to have two countries to be part of Somalia, and he wanted to rule those two countries. Okay, present countries. By then, they were not really countries. They were colonies, and these two were colonies of Italian. Sorry, that's the Eritrea and the Somaliland. All right. So Haile Selassie wanted to have Eritrea and Italian Somaliland that we did the previous week to be in one. To be as one country under Ethiopia, and then he laid claim to both in the letter he sent to Franklin D. Roosevelt, I think so. Roosevelt. Yes, Roosevelt. So this was American president. I think something interesting about this president is that he served more than two terms. I think he's the only president that served more than two terms. And he wrote this letter at the Paris Peace Conference and also at the first session of the United Nations. Okay. And the British and Americans actually preferred to cede all Eritrea except the Western province to the Ethiopians, right? So basically, all of it except the Western province, all of the Eritrea go to Ethiopia, all right? And this was also actually as a reward of the support of the Ethiopia to the British and American governments during the World War II. So they helped a lot with the World War II. So it was just like a reward. And the independence bloc of Eritrean parties consistently requested from the United Nations General Assembly that let's have a referendum be held immediately to settle the Eritrean question of sovereignty instead of just going ahead to decide and give it to Ethiopia. But again, all in all, superpowers. And following the adoption of the UN resolution of the 390A, Part 5, in December 1950, Eritrea was federated with Ethiopia under the prompting of the United States. And the resolution called for Eritrea and Ethiopia to be linked through a loose federal structure under the sovereignty of the emperor. All right, so everything is under emperor, but there was a little bit of loose sovereignty where there's a part that Ethiopia was to play under the emperor Haile Selassie, and then there's a part that was to be played by the Eritrea. And the Eritrean part had a local government that was just administrative and judicial, just administrative and dealing with judicial issues. It's just that structure. And yes, of course, it had its own flag, and it had control over its domestic affairs, including like police, all right, the policing part, the local administration, taxation. That is all that this government in Eritrea would do. However, the federal government, which was now the Ethiopian government under Haile Selassie, which actually for practically their purpose was just it was an existing imperial government, which controlled the foreign affairs, including the commerce, all right, the defense, finance, transportation. So anything that will give the federal government, these big departments that give the government at least some leverage in controlling the economy. So the foreign affairs, which commerce, including commerce, defense, finance, transportation, all of them ought to go to the federal government under Haile Selassie. Very, very important. It's getting interesting, ladies and gentlemen. What happened? In 1958, a group of Eritreans founded the Eritrean Liberation Movement, ELM. Ladies and gentlemen, this is important. ELM, Eritrean Liberation Movement, which mainly consisted of Eritrean students, professionals, and some intellects. So they decided to come up with this movement. And it engaged in some clandestine political activities intended to cultivate resistance to centralizing policies of the imperial Ethiopian state. And on 1st September 1961, this movement, the Eritrean Liberation Movement of Front, under the leadership of Hamid Idris Awate, waged an armed struggle of independence. All right. In 1962, the Emperor Haile Selassie himself, as we said, unilaterally dissolved the Eritrean parliament and annexed the territory. The war continued, the War of Independence, and this went for almost 30 years. 30 years. Eritrea looking for independence from not original colonizers, but the colonizers who inherited the colony, that's Ethiopia. For 30 years against the successive Ethiopian governments until 1991, when now the Eritrean People Liberation Front, EPLF, remember this is now different. This is a successor of the ELF, or what we said ELM. So the successor was Eritrean People's Liberation Front, which defeated the Ethiopian forces actually and in Eritrea. And they didn't just defeat the Ethiopian forces, all right? They went ahead to help a rebel of Ethiopians to take Addis Ababa, all right? So they came up and taken the Addis Ababa. And then the Eritrean had a referendum which was actually supervised by United Nations, which was dubbed as UNOVA or ANOVA, okay, UN over ANOVA or UNOVA, in which the Eritrean people overwhelmingly voted for independence, and Eritrea declared its independence, and international recognition is 1993. So it was a fight that went for long. Now, that was a brief history of this country's economy, this country's where it has come from, and it's better to go through that and to see what are some of the challenges and struggle these countries have gone through. And one thing that I realized is that this country actually struggled until 1993, when most of the African countries had already peaked. Some countries had better GDP, so this country really struggled. So yep, enough with our history. Now let's go to the economy and let's look at the backbone of economy, the GDP of this economy. All right, so stay tuned, and I'm here with you again. Just a reminder, I'm Emmanuel Gono. Please consider hitting the subscription button. And also for this country's economy, Eritrean economy, of course, we see that it started growing later in 1990s, 1993. But now in 2020, the IF actually estimated their GDP to be 2.1 billion. Remember, this is what we talked about, $2.1 billion, right? Remember, most of these GDP countries, the world currency is pegged on the US dollar. So in terms of dollars, $2.1 billion, that was their GDP by 2020. And the purchasing power parity was at $64 billion. That was their purchasing power parity. Now, between 2016 2019, Eritrea had a pretty good growth. And I think they were trying to pick up at 7.6%, between 7.6 to 10.2%. That is within 3 years, so which was a really good performance. But again, one thing that is different for this country is that the economy relies so much on mining and agriculture. In 2021, these accounted for only 20% of the GDP each. 20% of the GDP goes to mining, 20% goes to agriculture. Not really bad. I think that's good. But you know what happens with the countries that are actually on the primary production, because this is purely primary production, and goods they are going to sell in the international market. These are goods that actually are raw materials. And raw materials, you can't compare the prices of raw materials and finished product, okay? If you have cobalt and you export it to a different country, they make phones, they make so many things, and when it comes back, it's damn expensive. So a country and economy cannot just rely on this. Although agriculture is important to ensure that people are not angry, people are not going angry. There's no drought, there's no anger, so there's no hunger. it's really important. Agriculture is a really backbone of a country, and we'll see also most of these countries that are developed, most of them have extensive agriculture. Yeah, but yes, that's 20% each is agriculture, mining. But agriculture in Africa, most country, agriculture is subsistence. It doesn't use mechanization. So it's just hand to mouth agriculture. But again, one thing that is helping also Eritrean people is the remittances from abroad. Remittances from abroad, which are estimated to account for 12% of GDP, which is pretty high. Yeah, I think most people are outside there and they're sending money back home, and that is helping build the economy. In 2013, the pickup in growth was also attributed to the commencement of full operation in the gold and silver. Yep, they started, this is where the mining now started coming up. So they are mining gold, silver, which is mined by Canadian Nevson Resources. And the production of cement, also they have cement they produce in cement factories in Massawa. I think Massawa is a city in, I think after Asmara, this is the other biggest city, Massawa. And investment in Eritrea's copper, the zinc, there's Koli potash. I don't know what that is, Koli potash. Kaluli potash, Colluli, Koluli potash, which is being mined by Australia and Chinese mining companies. All right. So we've seen that the backbone of this economy is actually agriculture and mining. In this agriculture, most of the products that actually they produce and export are sorghum, millet, barley, wheat, legumes, vegetables, fruits, sesame, linseeds, cattle, sheep, goats, and camels. But again, what they say, primary products do not really have that value, and this is one setback that this country may be having. Let's go to their currency. What's their currency? This is interesting. Their currency is called Nakfa. Does it sound? Does it ring a bell? Nakfa. That's their currency. And this was actually introduced in November 1997, 15 November, to replace the Ethiopian birr at par. So this Ethiopian birr was the one that was circulating, but in 1997, I don't know. Yes, they decided to come up with the Nakfa, and the currency actually takes its name from Eritrean town of Nakfa. There's a town called Nakfa, site where the first major victory of the Eritrean War of Independence. The Nakfa is divided into 100 cents. So let's just go back to that Nakfa city. So I think Nakfa is a city where they had the major victory. So that's why they decided to call their currency Nakfa. All right, and it's also divided into 100 cents. So the Nakfa is pegged to the US dollar. And what's the rate? Exchange rate is $1 to 15 Nakfa, right? Yes, Eritrean Nakfa. So $1 is equals to 15 Eritrean Nakfa, although this is what is common. But again, I think pegged is not 15, it's between 13 and 14 there. But now what is common is the 15 exchange rate, 1 to 15. Inflation continues to be a problem in Eritrea. Particularly years of drought sometimes, which push those grain prices, and defense expenditure also remain high. They have to also spend on their defense, because until now, still Ethiopia, I think there's still a little bit of problem, so they have to have that high expenditure on defense. IMF estimated that in 2003, which is the most recent year figures, average inflation was 23%. That was so high. 23%. I think this is one country that I'll have to visit one day, and just to get some of these figures on the ground, boots on the ground. So, ladies and gentlemen, continue supporting my channel, so that one time I can give you, I can go boots on the ground and just give you this data, or this data from the ground, and just to report from there. Okay. So, yep, continue supporting, continue subscribing, all right, because I want to give you the best and give you first-hand information. Next, that is inflation. Of course, until now, it's still being said inflation could be high, but I think this is a country that has also built a lot of dams to catch water during rainy season, and I think they're trying to address that drought issues. What's the government budget and spending? Now, Eritrea does not publish its budget, making it physical condition difficult to assess. Does not publish budget and spending. And there's all right. So for their banking and finance, actually IMF, according to them, is that the banks in Eritrea are actually all government owned. So I'm getting this data from IMF. But yes, as I said, continue subscribing and support me, because one day I want to put boots on ground and just report live from there. And remember, here we are not trying to castigate a country, but we're just trying to post just give what's happening in the countries and just give advice, and also just to see and also to appreciate these countries where they have come from. So they are actually regulated by government, and they appear to be in compliance with prudent regulations according to IMF, so there's no problem. Although the commercial banking sector is largely profitable, mostly owing to income from foreign exchange transaction, so that's why they are really profitable. However, the sector is burdened by a proportion of non-performing loans. They have a lot of non-performing loans, and the co-lending activities do not generate sufficient income to cover operating costs at most commercial banks. So I think what they're relying on is the foreign exchange, especially you've had these also remittance from abroad. So I think this is what is building this economy, but they do not have private owned banks. And in 2011, and yeah, talking about the services now, in 2011, the services accounted for 55% of gross domestic product. I think now this is where now the economy started improving. Having 55% accounted for gross domestic product, I think that's something that has really improved. And bulk of it is actually financial services, and which are primarily rendered by the National Bank of Eritrea. Remember, this is the bank, the nation's central bank, and a commercial bank of Eritrea, the Housing and Commerce Bank of Eritrea, the Agriculture and Industrial Bank of Eritrea, the Eritrea Investment and Development Bank, the National Insurance Corporation of Eritrea. So you hear all of them end with Eritrea, start with Eritrea, which means these are state-owned banks. I know sometimes, yes, state-run, state-owned, especially if you don't have corruption, can really perform well and it can develop a country. However, in the sight of a lot of corruption, of course, we don't know if there's corruption in Eritrea. Yes, if there's a corruption in a country, privatizing most of these private, state-owned parastatals is better, because when you privatize, it goes basically to profit-oriented. So in terms of services, I think they are pretty doing well, but given that it's most of this is on state-owned, it's something that not worrying. I think the economic model is good, but again, we'll talk about it later. Let's talk about tourism. You know, most of African countries, tourism is the backbone of a country. And Eritrea's lack of access to fund, and they have presence of a number of landmines because of those wars and the continued tension that flare up between Eritrea and Ethiopia, have deterred the development of tourist industry in Eritrea, right? But again, I think they have a very nice coast, the coastal area, where they can have beautiful beaches and all that. So I think Eritrean government, sorry, can start working on either clearing those landmines and just ensuring that the coastal beach, they can attract really a lot of yes, a lot of tourists. In terms of industry and manufacturing sectors, so during the period of federation, which was the time where it was Ethiopia, right, that was ruling, industrial capacity largely shifted to Ethiopia, right? So most of them were taken to Ethiopia, leaving the Eritrean industrial sector with outmoded capital equipment. So in 2003, industry accounted for 25.3% of gross domestic product. But again, it's not industry like manufacturing. This is actually processing, food and dairy processing, which processed alcoholic beverages, yeah, food, dairy, alcoholic beverages, glass. Also, okay, so those are the major processing taking place: leather goods, marble, textile, and salt. All right, their margin is not really that high. The margin in the international market for such goods is low. All right, however, yeah, still good. Now, in conclusion, as we are finishing this, one thing that I think Eritrean government lacks, or what dominates, not what lacks, but what dominates, is little private sector, very little private sector. Um, that yes, basically, which it's not bad. It's not bad, because I think that um, yeah, sometimes government regulation is better. However, with government regulation without private sector, sometimes many people will suffer because the government cannot reach everyone. So you need to empower people. You need to ensure that people are opening their own businesses and people to grow. All right. And that one also will help develop a country, develop economy. There's sectors of economy that a government cannot grow. Housing, they cannot do housing for everyone. There must be private people who are doing housing. When it comes to I know there are some areas that governments can work on: public transportation, the roads, the road network, telecommunication network, all that the government can work on, all right? But when it comes to provision of basic, like housing, education, of course, I know they have very good education system, but for education, for housing, when you have a bigger population, their population might not be big, but still empowering people is better to ensure that the government is not overburdened on spending, and they can divert their spending on something very, very important like the road networks, the communication networks, the telecom networks, all right? Because those are the backbone. Power network, all right, electricity, just to ensure that everybody is empowered. And you cannot do all this, all right, when people themselves are not empowered to be able to wake up and work on their own, have private owned banks, private owned big businesses, and that also increases the tax of a country. And with that, the revenue will increase, government expenditure will also increase in turn, and the country will grow. That's my advice, and another advice in the words of Adam Smith, the 18th century philosopher and the father of modern economics. He said that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. So people also need to have their own interest, and when they have their own interest, they're also going to be able to be productive, and that's how also efficient services come up, right? Because whenever people have interest, they want to compete, the competition increases and better services increases, all right? So both parties, from the words of Adam Smith, what we've just read, so just a little bit of explanation, both parties to voluntary exchange transactions have their own interest. For them to voluntarily exchange transactions, they have their own interest in the outcome, all right? But neither can obtain what he or she wants without addressing what the other wants. So I need tea, I'll need to pay. I need this, I'll need to pay. And in that case, the brewer, or let's go with the baker, I'm going to buy a bread because I need the bread, and the baker needs the money. So it's the interest, right? And it is the rational self-interest that can lead to economic prosperity. Rational self-interest, right? I know most communist countries won't agree with me, but the rational self-interest can lead to economic prosperity. Still, I respect also other economic models. Those who have the communist still okay, because I think you still work on a way on getting everything done right and getting your people also doing good, okay? But this is just my 2 cents on this. And okay, the regional governments, yes, can go with the mixed economy, which is a blend of free markets and government regulation. Of course, what Adam Smith has talked about. And just to let you know that Eritrea, just an advice, markets play a dominant role, but are regulated to greater extent by government to correct market failures. So you can have the market, that is the free market. People are coming up with companies, business, different economies, sectors. And let me tell you this, that you have to control, which is the work of the government, now to control, right, and correct these market failures, such as in case there's pollution, traffic congestion, promote social welfare, and for other reason, defense and also public safety. So those are my 2 cents after looking at the history, the economy, which was really interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of my video. Feel free to let me know what country do you want us to do next, all right? Here at Emmanuel Ngono, I am Emmanuel Ngono. Look up at my channel. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell, all right? I'm going to give you the best. I'm going to give you different countries, and anything you feel I've left out, anything you feel that maybe I didn't say right, feel free to go to the comment section, say hi, comment, and subscribe, all right? Please do watch, all right? Do watch also. Let's support this so that it can go far and far and far. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end and the end of our journey. I hope the journey was safe and sound, and I hope the journey was not bumpy. All right. Bye.